Hello! Back in October, Instruo and I launched the Oct-Expander. We had an in-person event up at Signal Sounds in Glasgow, where we had ØCHD-OBER-FEST, a celebration of Oct and all things surrounding Oct, and secretly it was also the Oct-Expander launch. As I say, this was an in-person event at Signal Sounds, and we also live-streamed the event too. And here we've got a local recording, high-definition version of that stream for those that missed it, those that might want to watch it again, and even for those that were there that just want to relive the wonder of lederhosen-clad DivKid, the pretzels and beer that we had, and Oktoberfest in all its glory. And as well as the stream, I have a separate video that's now live and linked down below, and this is the case that I took up to launch the Oct-Expander for the event. It breaks down this ambient, very dynamic polyphonic modular patch and how all this Oct and Oct-Expander modulation was used to create this shifting dynamic, as I say, polyphonic stereo patching. Check out that video down below, enjoy the live stream, and get yourself a pretzel and a beer, and some lederhosen if you've got some kicking in the back of a wardrobe somewhere. Cheers for watching, and enjoy the stream. Just trying to navigate like a 20-second delay in the stream.
Hi everyone.
Freeze.
I'm Alex and I work at Signal Sounds. We are extremely proud to host Oktoberfest, which is a celebration of all things Oct, our favourite modulator. And I'd just like to thank all of you for coming. I'd like to thank everybody who's watching the live stream, and I think without any further preamble from me, I'd like to pass over to Jason Lim.
What about the guy who gave us the beer?
And oh yeah, there's a guy who gave us the beer. Phil at Simple Things Fermentations, and of course Brave Bakers who supplied us with the pretzels. And there's also Jason Lim and Ben DivKid Wilson.
I can just wave from the sidelines. And never come in shot. Yeah. No, Google just chose this moment to go, please verify your account. As soon as I hit the go live button, so I'm like, give me the verification code.
Cool. It does say we're live now, so I think we're...
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
I got it.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. Hello.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for your interest in what we do. You've probably seen, or don't know, there's now an Oct-Expander, which is pretty nuts. Right from starting doing Octs, we were literally up at your old place, defining what those rates were. You were swapping in caps and resistors. Now, I'm going to put some pins on the back of this. That's in what for?
So well, I've got ideas.
Yeah, they'll mirror the out. We'll see, effectively. So every Oct is potentially there to work with the expander. And it's had those expander pins since day one.
We've had the odd question here. What are these for? It's like,
yeah, forget about those.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah. And there's a couple of people, they've plugged them into churn machine expanders and things at their own risk. There's been some probe poking around by people, I think, which is nice to see. Some inquisitive digging around. But yeah, we've had ideas, pretty much everything we could think of as a modular function, really. Mm-hmm. And Jason's had a lot of, Jason, are you free for a call? What about this? What about that? Can we do this? Can we do that? But what we're left with far surpasses any of that in that it's properly active, clever, interesting modular functions as opposed to, I don't know, say a load of attenuators that you could do elsewhere.
I think that there's so many ideas. I mean, loads of people have pitched ideas on it when the discussions happened, if there's been like chats on forum threads or stuff, or people asking what the pins are. And a lot of the ideas that so often they boil down to, well, that's a patch. It's like, you're using VCA, you're cross-modulating between them. So there were quite a few design constraints in getting this thing viable, because the plan was to, we kind of had the price point in mind to get it really just an absolute no-brainer to add it to an Oct and get it, in a lot of systems. But to do that, it's like, okay, if we're adding VCAs to be able to cross-modulate amplitudes between them, that's going to be a lot of circuitry it'll end up deeper than the Oct itself, which...
and wider. Yeah. There's certainly been ideas that are like, this is a whole patch I like to do with Oct, can we do this? And it's like, well, yeah, in a case. but not in a... It would be bigger than Oct, and maybe not the right thing to do.
Yeah.
We should say, as everyone in the room that has an Instruo playing card, put it in the box for the in-person competition. If you haven't, do you want to hand cards across, or we can maybe do a little box walk around and make sure cards are in there. We will be pulling a card out for the in-person giveaway, and we've got an online giveaway as well. We're going to pull names out of a hat as well for everyone that entered on Instagram, which will come a little bit later on. So yeah, the VCA one specifically was one that I was like, I really like modulating the levels with VCAs. And it's like, we're not going to fit an octal VCA into any sensible expander kind of patch.
I think there was a certain point where I was just like, I've got some ideas, just leave it with me. And
Yeah.
kind of just put some things together. So I guess if we just like talk through the tops of it, because like we had the video playing live here before this started, but there's pretzels and beer, so I don't know how many folk paid
And you
much
can watch
attention
that
to it.
later.
So it's in 4 different sections. Let's throw that camera. There we go. That way round. That way round. There we go. So 4 different sections. We needed a name. It's called the Oct Expander, but I've got the Oct with the slash and then 4 squared on it because it's 16 new outputs. But it's going to be just called the Oct Expander because that's what it is. Top section, we've got 4 full wave rectified LFOs. So it takes 4 of the LFOs from the Oct and just folds them up positive, double the frequency.
The nice thing is because they're not all synced ratios of each other, it's not like folding up the second LFO then gives you the rate of the top one. So it's 4 new rates as well as them being unipolar, which I'd used all 8 octave outputs in this patch. So it's quite nice to have another 4 new frequencies to play with.
The next section is diode logic, which is still a circuit that fries my brain. Like when I was fiddling about with it, I think it features on one of the mutable modules as being a thing. So it follows a combination of OR logic and AND logic, but because it's variable signals, it's always the max side is always taking the higher amplitude of the 2. So you get weird patterns when you're like mixing them together and viewing them on an oscilloscope. But I had to like build the circuit in simulators to be like, right, so that's when they cross over, it goes that way. Yeah, so you can it's a fun one. Yeah.
You can lead to quite interesting jumps and kinks in that wave.
Yeah,
because it's following that top line, and then the other one comes up and goes, I'm going to follow that one now.
So it's split into 2 pairs. So there are 2 parallel diode logic pairs. The left side they're coming from 2 of the faster LFOs. The other one's from the 2 of the slower. So I've tried to get a good range of frequencies across the Oct because that's they're unsynced. They're just sort of approximately halving in amplitude as they cascade down. Trigger section, which is taking a group of the 4 leftmost LFOs from an Oct, and it's deriving a trigger signal from the start of the rising edge.
Yeah, as soon as it comes off that bottom peak.
Yeah. And they kind of cascade in a strange way going round. So if you patch from all 4 of them, you've got discrete trigger signals at the rate of those LFOs. But if you have any of them unpatched, they cascade in summing normals clockwise. So if you patch from only the bottom left, you're getting this layering up of all 4 signals. So it's quite nice. You get the sort of regularity of the fastest frequency, and then you're getting like flams as they layer up. And then the last section is probably the weirder one. I've tried to coin the term slow noise for this because they're 4 outputs that are 4-bit DACs. So it's basically low resolution step random. So on an oscilloscope, it looks like step noise, but it's not a regular timing because it's derived from 4 LFOs as being the bits for this signal. So yeah, it's a weird one. Ben's come up with some really nice ways of showing it in the patch.
Well, it's because there's square waves at the core of Oct. That is the center of all those oscillator cores, and triangles are derived from them. So that was one of the questions as you put pins on as, well, why is there 2 sets of pins if it's a mirror of the outs? It's like, well, there's these square waves. So there's been this, well, what do we do with a square wave for a long time? It's not a particularly common LFO type I would use for a lot of my patching, but having them stack up in this step random manner. Flavors of slow noise, I think, is fair. In a similar way that white, pink, red, blue, audible noise sources sound different. Yeah. They feel very different as modulators.
It doesn't quite get to fast enough audio rate. I think certain ones that are using the higher rate LFOs, they'll get up to about 100, 150 hertz or so. So you'll maybe get like some movement at that rate, but it's just going to be clicky and noisy, which is still apt. But very different from like the Rungler circuit, which is a similar thing where it's like an 8-bit
Yeah.
DAC, I think. So it's faster, and you can get it up to like what sounds like full bandwidth white noise. So this is that, but half the bit count and lower rates. But yeah, it's pretty interesting. I think I'm going to take lead, and I'm going to show a few ways that I've got it patched up in my system, which is much messier than Ben's.
So Jason will play for a bit. We'll have any Q&A and I'm talking about the patch. Alan do the same. Ben from Instruo as well will set up a patch, and we come and have a play and kind of hang out at the end as well.
So this is a few things I've been playing with. It's basically a collection of my go-to patches within how I use the harmony into Psy, how I use the CSL, and looper into arbor in this case. Actually, if I press this button, this should bring us up through the speakers a bit. That's just going to feed back, I think. I'll leave it. So I'll pull this out voice at a time. So first voice here, I've got the Psy chord, which is modulated by a few things. I've got the top LFO of the oct as my vibrato source. So that's kind of what I'm using to set the pace of my oct. So I don't have it self-patched or no modulation into it. So I've got the top LFO at that around 4 or 5 hertz point. So it's just adding a bit of pitch wobble to the psych voice. I'm then using one of the stepped random voices into the interval offset control. So this is taking the chord voice and it's throwing the voices up or down, octaves, fifths, fourths. And this is where you can really clearly hear the sort of rate of patterns. So there's a bit of regularity because it is LFOs that are free running at fixed frequencies because I don't have them dynamically shifting. Keep resonance down a bit, just take CD off, there we go. So if I speed up the rate of modulation, everything's tied together. So there's that's the thing that was always nice about the octs conceptually, was everything controlled from a single rate pot. So you turn that up, everything gets faster. So the same thing applies with all the outputs from the expander. And I've pretty much forgotten what else is going on in this patch because I kept just like modulating it throughout today. So that's kind of like the easiest way to sort of get into it. I think on the CSL voice, which is supposed to be following the root. Here we are. So I've got, you might be able to see on the scope here, this is another one of the slow noises, so this is the slowest profile of it. So I'm using the 4 slowest LFOs and they're comprising the 4 bits of the DAC. So it ends up this like sort of slower, just gradual movement. And I've got that going into the vocal octave of the top voice of a CSL, which is hard synced to the bottom. So that's where we're getting these big sweeps and changes in timbre. Texturally, I've got other LFOs just going into different parts of the arbor, into parts of the, more into the CSL. I didn't organize this very well. Normally I cable tie all the patch cables and can follow it a bit, but yeah, like I wanted to just try and see where I could take a patch that was just using my go-to approaches and just add a little bit more movement to it. So things like adding in that little bit of variation to the interval offset on the side, movement to the bandpass filters. The drums themselves are actually being passed through. There we are. So this is the new Bafako Effects Boy, which I did a cartridge for. So it's got a phaser effect in it. And this is using one of the LFOs from the Oct going in as the modulation source. So I can offset that with the center frequency of the all-pass filters. Yeah, so just it's more modulation. So modulation hub, I've got 8 HP, and that's just branching out to everywhere else in this patch. And didn't even use the trigger signals. Got a couple of, I've got quite a lot of LFOs from the Oct itself, still free. So yeah.
I used all mine up.
Yeah, I wasn't quite as prepared.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions directly for Jason's patch? Yeah.
Okay, so this is maybe a really stupid question, so sorry.
No stupid questions.
In terms of how that synchronizes with the rhythm of the drum break, does it, or
No.
is it?
So I've just got it independent. So it's
So it's shifting everything gently. So see if you were to use the trigger outputs.
Yep.
Is that good? You're just.
That could be done, yeah. So I'm currently using the fourth from bottom LFO as my modulation rate. So let me bring the drums up. So if I go fully dry, that's the raw sample.
Yeah.
So it's kind of sweeping that sort of rate. So I've just kind of tuned that in
By ear.
by ear, yeah. But if I were to use a, there's not going to be a way for me to do this without completely breaking the patch and getting completely lost in the loopers mode. But
There would be a way of
there would be a way, yeah.
thinking in some way.
Yeah, because having the trigger outputs, like there's always a way to use an Oct as a master clock. If you pull that into like a YAS or something that's a diode like rectifier, then deriving just a square wave pulse from that.
Yes.
The trigger signal, it's got that baked in, so I can pull out and use one of 4 of the oscillators, so I can kind of pick the starting rate. It means that you're using that one oscillator as your main pulse, and then you derive all your clocks from that. And if you speed up, slow down from there, everything else that's coming from the Oct is going to shift from that as well. But, yeah.
You could do that balance of like re-triggering the start point on your looper and the speed of the looper. A bit like you would with a hard sync on an analog LFO, just trying to get that cycle or that full bar.
There is a clock input on the, Finn, you'll know this because you've programmed it. There is a clock input on the looper, isn't there? Like an extra, yeah, there's a tap tempo that'll follow it, so I don't.
The trigger, it triggers at the start of the LFO, the rising edge?
Yeah, the rising edge.
As it goes up from the bottom,
Yeah, as the LFO starts to rise.
Yeah, I think I screwed up with giving you the wrong graphic when we were drawing the manual. Yeah. So it's, yeah, I did it from 0, so if it was like crossing through 0 like that, I had, sort of, like, oh, that's wrong, Dom. He's like, yeah, but that's what you sent me. It's like, I was wrong, Dom. Yeah, so it's at the core of the circuit, it's what's called an integrator. So there's a square wave that is going into a circuit with a capacitor. So basically when it's fully positive, it's going to start charging this capacitor up until it hits its peak, which basically feeds back and tells the square wave to flip its state, which then goes full negative and discharges. So it's kind of this constant flip-flop at the core of the triangle. So when it is rising up, that's because the square wave is flipped positive. So that's where that square wave's starting, which generates the trigger signal. Yeah. So.
Cool.
The slow, sorry, there was another one. Sorry.
It's okay.
The slow random output, is this some kind of sample hold or is this something?
It looks like a sample and hold. That's the part that's quite interesting. So I don't know how clear this is on the projector. So I'll speed this up a bit. So this is.
Have you a simple way of defining what a DAC ladder is?
Who here can count in binary? It's basically counting in binary over 4 bits. So 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 1. So it's basically over this 4-bit range, there are 16 discrete combinations of ones and zeros. So that gives us 16 discrete voltage amplitudes. So if we're ramping up through this, counting directly in binary, then it's going to give you a perfect step ramp. But because each of these bits is just a random LFO, then they're just like flipping up whatever rate they're going at. So that's where we're getting random jumps. Yeah. So the interesting part, like what I think, I can't remember if we did this on that video that we recorded in my studio, but I've got a massive VCV patch that I built that was the prototype for testing this, where I had several OCs and I was pulling out from groupings of the LFOs into logic to turn them into the square waves and then summing them and basically emulating a DAC. And there are a few factors at play. There's the rate of the LFOs themselves, which changes the rate at which bits are changing. But there's also most significant bit versus least significant bit of it. So counting in binary, if that's my least significant bit, most significant bit, as I'm counting up like just 0 through 16, or 0 to 15, then the most significant bit is going to be the one that changes the slowest. So it means if I have the faster LFO there, I'm going to have more aggressive, bigger jumps in amplitude. Whereas if I have faster one at the least significant bit, I'm going to get more slow movement. So there are some profiles of it that are a bit more like drunk random, where it's kind of like making like smaller movements.
That random walk, isn't it? That kind of Brownian thing.
Exactly. And then there are other ones where it's kind of, it almost looks like when you undersample an LFO and you get these sort of cyclic melodic patterns, because there's a degree of consistency with the LFOs just being free running, but they're interacting with each other in this recombination. So it's weird. That's why I kind of leaned into slow noise as being the term, because it is stochastic timing between the 4 bits of each one. So,
and that's what makes it random. If they were all synced like quarter note, eighth note, 16th note LFOs, you would get a very regular repeating stepped sequence out of the thing.
Yeah. So I think like early on when we were patching with it, when you were up the other month,
August.
whenever it was, you've immediately patched it via the random step. So it was using that as the random source that was then being sampled, and that was keeping it rigid to the timing of a patch. And it's exactly how you'd use noise. So that's why slow noise, I think, is a really good way of framing it in that use case.
Just to chip in on that, if you look at the quick start guide on the manual now as well,
Dom drew the quick start guide, it's very good.
I did sample the outputs, and they are visualized.
Yeah. So we zoomed out and actually like copied in like examples of the
visual representation of what the kind of differences are between the different outputs.
Yeah.
These are like 4 LFOs that are like summed into that ADC, DAC. Sorry.
Essentially, yeah. So each square wave is capped to 0 to 5 volts. So it's four 5-volt signals that are summing in this ladder DAC that's giving them the hierarchy from least significant bit to most significant bit. Yeah, it's weird.
You take them out if you plug, like for example, if you plug something in one of the LFOs, it's going to take it out from the DAC.
It's not. So there is a trick which I've not actually tried yet, because I think this will make for a fun video. So the headers on the back of the expander itself are keyed, and they'll show, so that's the header that takes the triangle waves, that's the header that takes the square waves. There we go. They're keyed so that the ribbon cable will only go in one direction on it, but the other side on the oct, that's left free. We don't have a keyed header on the oct itself. So in the manual it describes as having the red stripe towards the back of the module, so like facing into the case. If you flip it the other way around,
It's going to flip all those bits around.
Weirder than that.
Because they're not uneven. The two that go left-hand, right-hand side of oct would flip, but the combo ones between that would get weirder than that.
It's weirder than that. I laid it out to make my life easier in terms of efficiency of routing. I should have gone with LFOs 1 through 8 and gone like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which would have meant rotating it would give you like
an even flip kind of thing.
An inversion. They're all over the place. Like I just think, okay, that's closer. So they really are just scrambled. So I've not tried it yet, but inverting the square wave source will scramble the order of bits. So you'll get 4 completely new flavors of random noise, which
and it won't break anything. An important point for anyone curious.
Yeah, I mean,
It's not just the noise, it's everything on the expander is going to get flipped around the LFOs.
The triggers will change around. If you do the same thing with the triangles, yeah, same thing. You'll get a different combination because the triangles are. Don't lean on that. The triangles are also scrambled, but in a different pattern from the square waves because. Because that was at that time it was future me's problem to have to deal with remapping that. Yeah. But it randomizes it, so flip it around and you get a random new shape.
Which four of the 8 LFOs are the ones that go into the DAC? Is it the slowest four, the fastest four?
It varies per DAC. So
Each of the 4 outs is different ones. Again,
So it's a different combo.
appreciate we don't have it up on screen, but the quick start's the best thing of the different bits feeding the different functions. It might be the left hand 4, the right hand 4, top 4, bottom 4. Each different output is a different set of those 4. We can pass the manual around.
Yeah, we can do that.
I will say, if you haven't seen it, there is the demo video on my channel as well, where we go through how they sound, just as out of time, just free stochastic timing, and then also, as Jason said, sampling them as a noise source, which might seem counterintuitive because you think, well, I could just sample the noise source that's maybe built into my sample and hold. But the patterns you get are very different. As Jay said, some jump very quickly, some move up in voltage and back and kind of jump walk.
Yeah. So I think the groupings are, it's the top 4 LFOs together as one of them, like fastest to slowest in one order like that. The same thing's a similar thing, but the slowest 4 LFOs, and it's flipped in terms of most significant bit, least significant bit. The other 2 are then the left column and the right column. So those ones have a much wider distribution of frequencies per bit. So one of them ends up much slower movement of overall, but with faster low amplitude deviations, and then the other one's the other way around. So you're kind of getting these. It's almost like ostinato, like
big kind of like wide handspan on a piano.
It's like that, but then like moving around at smaller amplitude. Yeah, it's really weird, but like surprisingly musical for being driven from 8 or 4 completely unrelated LFOs. So cool.
I have a question from online.
Yeah.
Somebody says, so what you're saying is that you could potentially add 2 expanders for 40 different outputs.
I've not run the math, but there's probably going to be a way to do that. I mean, that's something I'm quite keen to do, is to show ways of breadboarding it and breaking it out, because it is just raw signals like going in.
To do that level of oct weird ridiculousness, but just expanders, 1 oct.
1 oct and a full rack of expand. Yeah. That would give a lot.
Someone did ask earlier a similar question that I caught on the video of, could I use 2 octs with 1 expander? And you could take the squares of one and the triangles of another.
The ribbons are discrete, so you could bridge it. Although, would there be overlap? You would get some different variation, because it would be pulling combinations of some of the triangle waves would be sourced from one. Yeah, it's weird.
I don't have a direct use case for that, but it's possible. You could plug the 2 in. Yeah, effectively.
Could we just make a passive module that rearranges the headers?
I've got a sketch laid out, but it's messy, because it was a headache enough trying to figure out my weird mapping and then how that correlated to particular pins on the ribbon to make sure that they matched.
Like 64 variations.
Like I think I'll detail it all out and give it to Dom to graphikize, make it look pretty as a reference manual. He's out the room, so it's fine.
Could you go over a little more how you're using the arbor with the oct? You mentioned it was modulating.
I think I've just got random CV patched in, so I've got 2 of the diode logic ones. So the diode logic pairs, they're quite nice, especially at the moment I don't have it self-patched. If you self-patch the oct, then you get these weird sort of wonky
exponential kinks. And
when you do that, the diode logic goes wild. You get these like really cool like sort of peaks and valleys. When it's just linear, you're kind of getting like two triangles like overlapping, so you get this kind of like higher averaged positive peaks. Both signals will still be bipolar, because if both like negative peaks of the 2 triangle waves just
low
align,
go down low into negative voltage,
that would end up with the highest being the higher of those 2. But overall, it will average out as being you'll have like a higher higher bias signal and a lower bias signal. So I've kind of just got a pair of them going into intensity and length on the arbor. So if I bring up. So I've just pulled the rate of the oct all the way down. So things are just slower and more steady. So that's it. Basically sitting more static at a fixed length or a fixed intensity. Bringing up and I'm just getting more random setups. So this arbor is currently set up running in the ring buffer mode. So it's in follow mode with the output trigger end of cycle resetting the recorder to the start. So it's just taking in this random CV, which is coming from one of the DACs into the harmony. So it's just taking that and kind of delaying it and compounding that way. So
what's the random going to on the arbor?
To the no, I've got that unpatched. I did have it patched and then it broke everything. I was like, oh, why is that not doing reverb? It's because it's in the preset that doesn't have reverb assigned to it. So yeah, read the manual.
I've drenched my patch in Arbor reverb, so between us, like, we've covered it.
Cool. I'll stop hogging the mic and let Ben demo something a bit more well rehearsed. I mean, like, we'll be cutting the stream after we've kind of demoed these, and then you're welcome to come. We'll have a shot of these after the camera cut or storm the stage now.
A quick bit about the patch and we'll dive in. This is genuinely a situation that does happen regularly of I've used all 8 oct outputs. And it's quite nice to see other people going, I need a second oct, and multiples thereof. All 8 LFOs out of oct are modulating a wavetable voice, which I went for the silliest possible cabling. I figured this looked nice. So all 4 voices of wavetables, they take 2 modulators each. The unipolar outs that are at new rates, because they're flipped up and doubled in frequency, are then modulating the level. So every voice is just freely shifting all over the place. And it's a patch I've performed with and really enjoyed, just this free moving modulation of tone, while there's also a free moving level of notes coming in and out. The max min that we were talking about is then what's doing a master tone and level shift. All of that mixes in stereo into blades. So the max and the min is either opening the level on the left or right side or changing the filtering on the left and right side. It's quite dynamic in that it can just disappear, and it's just where those max and mins are bottoming out for a moment. And sometimes you want to kick the rate up a little bit. Sometimes it's quite nice to have those gaps in the music. And then I can drench it in Arbor reverb. Yeah.
Bring it up.
Yeah, bring it up. Let's go for it. I'll just do that first. That's Arbor's reverb for anyone that's not heard it. It's lovely. So it's quite nicely interactive in that there's moments where you probably say I'm riding the oct LFO, being a bit like, come on, give me an up, give me an up, where it's just kind of sat with nothing happening. But the nice thing in that is that I've split the hard left and right outs on the filtering. One feeds the reverb, the other feeds the delay. So the max might bring up the right-hand side while the min has brought down the left-hand side, so then there's nothing feeding the reverb, or vice versa, the left side might be active, so nothing's there to feed the delay. So you get this kind of like max-min seesaw of kind of what the effects are doing, and then the reverb's kind of long enough to fill those tails and gaps where nothing's really happening. And then we mentioned self-patching oct earlier, which is kind of two power moves for me, are self-patching the thing and then using a voltage to stall it, which just means putting a voltage in the CV input and turning the attenuator all the way down, or putting a negative voltage in. So the little keyboard is just to stall it. So when these moments happen, I can just hold a gate which will just stall all of Oct LFOs. That's also then going to stall all the new unipolar outs and the max min, and the top keyboard's playing pitch changes through harmony for the chords. So it's almost waiting for a moment where it sounds nice, stalling the thing, and you have the ability to play in a pattern at that point. And they all stop where they are and then carry on from where they are. It's not like a mute switch where it's off and all the voltage is dumped to zero. They will just stop and then carry on from where they are.
It's like a global track and hold over the entire Oct plus expander, because all the expander sources are driving the LFOs. You can just send a negative gate or an inverted positive gate and then just flatline everything. Yeah.
So I patched a sort of combination of these two things up in the demo video. The first patch shows the unipolar outs, which are doing a similar thing, and the max min is doing the blades filtering, again, level and tone on each side. It felt really different, to the point that when I patched this, it kind of felt like I had the cables the wrong way around or something, and I was like, it's a bit too slow, but these gaps, you could change the entire behavior by just swapping which of the four outs you use. It might be that I want to use the faster max min pairs for level and more slowly change the filtering. It's the other way around here, so that's why we're getting these moments of nothingness filled out by the reverb in between.
It's quite an interesting detail. Like, that was something that I spent a bit of time mulling over when, I mean, there's kind of like two aspects of it. It was coming up with the combinations of what to group for certain parts of the circuitry, and then realizing, okay, there's certain outputs that have got radically different rates. So the top section, the four we rectified, is fastest to slowest, kind of going clockwise-ish. I think that was the layout, something like that.
Yeah, like a bit like that.
Yeah, and I kind of, there's not enough space in 4HP to really go in and show like your fastest, slowest, medium. So I think just over time, I'm still getting to know it and knowing what the flavors of random step noise are and where they kind of best fit. So it's one of these things that I think it's going to be a bit of an investment in time to like really learn and get to know the particular character traits of the different outputs and stuff. So yeah.
Well, you could repatch this, and it's why I went color-coded the whole cabling of, it's the purple section are the unipolar outs that modulate the level of the VCAs, so each of the four voices is coming up and down. I could stick to all those purple cables still being the unipolar outs, but just swap them around, and you'd then get a very different result. So it might be that the third of the chord is going to take a while to come in, while the fifth and the first are dancing around much faster. You could really spend time kind of tuning that in.
Oh, no, I'll be back.
Okay, tiny mic. Yeah, I think I just knocked a fine tune, actually. So we might have a discordant chord come in. Yeah, does that raise any questions? I haven't used the triggers or the stepped random slow noise in this one.
I was too busy doing social media stuff, but did you mention about the cascading triggers?
I did.
Okay.
I believe Ben's patch, which, as we come later on towards the end of what we're doing, we'll have a listen to Ben's and a play around as well.
Somebody asked online, Stephen Fountain, It says, I love the free-running nature of it, and it's not criticism, but I'm just curious about the design choice of not adding a reset or clock sync function.
Right from me drawing it out, and you got it instantly from a musical standpoint, it was always, this will not reset. It was always because it was a patch, I was patching 8 LFOs to do it, combinations of dual LFOs and quads, and it was a really janky Photoshop I sent you based on just pulling that's a 4 HP modular on modular grid. If I just rearrange all its jacks, it kind of looks how I want. Sent a really janky image to Jason and a text note.
Reset was something that I thought early on when we were having discussions, because I thought that was going to be an important factor, but then playing with it and just the simplicity of it being free running and actively phasing, where you're just getting sort of natural movement, I was like, it doesn't need. I mean, like there's so many more interesting ways of using hard sync or reset, but you kind of need more complexity from that voice in itself. You need discrete control, so it's kind of it would have made the oct huge. Yeah, there would have needed to be more jacks and inputs and stuff like that. So it was feature creep. It was trying to keep it restricted in, and I did play about with adding a hard sync element to the circuitry, but triangle cores are weird. Like when you do it with this particular one, like hard sync on a sawtooth is really easy because it is just a unipolar ramp as it charges up, hits its threshold, resets.
Dumps down.
Yeah, so you just preempt that reset point, and then it's just hard setting back to the bottom. The triangle wave, you'd want that to reset to 0 volts, and then it's having to charge either way. Like that was something that I implemented into the Gnoni oscillator. So it's got the ability to reset to 0, but it's a very different circuit core. Whereas these ones, being a basic integrator, if you essentially short the capacitor, it's going to lock to full negative or full positive, which gets messy when it's an LFO because it's going to be a hard jump to the extremes. You'd kind of want it reined into the middle. So mechanically, it was unfeasible from a circuit standpoint. But I think if we were to try and add that in, the oct would have just collapsed on itself and been too much too quickly. So
it was always. I mean, I'd considered these things before I got in touch, but in terms of patching 8 LFOs to do what oct does, and then patching a voltage source to CV 8 LFOs to then control them like the knob does, I realised that every time I went back to a patch or turned the system back on, I wasn't doing it anyway. I was never trying to reset them. It was always just about parameters moving and drifting on their own. And it always felt musical, so it was distill it to what the musical idea is. So it was an early consideration, but
it would have been massive, and it would have been so much more expensive if we'd had any more circuitry.
There was also that of, we want this musical idea to be relatively accessible for the format and for people to be able to enjoy it, not be that big and it not be that expensive either. So I was glad we could do it as we did.
I've been struggling to see what the reverb is.
The reverb is Aber, the Instruo granular module. So that's all I'm using it for at the minute. It's taking a feed of these chords. It's fully dry, which means these grains, take that out. It's had my knocked out of tune chord fed into it. It's currently fully dry, which that's what's coming through. And a bit of voltage into the expander on Aber, and as this kicks back around, a negative voltage on Aber will give you a wet-only reverb.
It's set up very much for giving you immediate reverb throw capability, where you can send a full negative reverb and that full negative voltage, and that will remove the dry signal and just give you a sustained freezing reverb. Going positive voltage will give you up to the same thing, slightly different character, but it keeps the dry signal in as well. So you've kind of got these. It's really, really effective for getting a spread of.
Well, the reverb parameters change as well, don't they? If you add more positive or negative voltage, the reverb's morphing larger and smaller as well.
So you're not actually putting any samples on that, but
no, it's all the way dry. I mean, the input is my now out of tune chord that I'll tune later on. But yeah, fully dry. It could be fully wet, which is it's just self-capturing this chord that, as I say, is now out of tune as I've knocked it. But I mean, it's still doing its job. But yeah. But that effects thing of having a stereo signal, it's another sort of separate patch to Oct, really, just one that I enjoy, but having a stereo signal. And at first, I was like, I don't really want to just have a delay on one side. That's strange, but I can mix it back in mono. But actually separating out a stereo image and saying the right side will feed reverb, the other will feed delay, or vice versa. Especially where your left and right patching is really dynamic. It gives a really nice spread of effects. So that's me turning up the delay, and nothing must be coming out of that side. So there's nothing for the delay to be fed. And likewise with the reverb, with moments where there's no dry going in and it's just holding, waiting for something else to feed the input. With less voltage, much shorter reverb, like completely drown it out.
Yeah, Sebastian did a really good job on the reverb implementation. It was genuinely an afterthought at the end of all the granular stuff being implemented.
I did feel slightly ridiculous thinking I'll put an arbor in and just put some reverb on and leave it dry. As in dry, no grains, but it sounds really good, so that's what ended up in there. Yeah, any other questions?
All good.
Yeah, cool. We could send for having a play at the end. Yeah. If we move across the competition winners, in person and online. Ooh, should we get someone else to pick out a...
The online ones, and then that's the in-store ones.
In-store. Should we go with in-store first?
Yeah.
Ooh, you can kind of see the names on them. So...
Okay, I'll hold it up and you pick.
I was going to say, put your hand round and do it.
Okay.
Grab one so you can't see. Yeah, we can...
Here we go. Ivor.
Have we actually said what this... It is an Oct expander. There we go.
Oh, there it is.
They're already prepared. There you go, man.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Come on, thank you. If we do a similarly as looking away as possible again.
Yep.
So these were Instagram entries. We ran it online on Instagram as well.
Okay, that one. Greg Mulholland, who is the moderator of our... Yeah.
There you go. We'll be
Send this to you, Greg.
Yeah, we'll be in touch to send it along. Great.
Nice one.
Yeah, we'd like you to come and get hands-on and have a play around. Ask questions, enjoy more beer from Simple Things Fermentation. Thank you to them for supporting and helping us. We didn't quite lederhosen it up. Yeah, a bit too much appropriation. But yeah, grab food, drinks, come and have a play. Thank you to everyone online that's watching, whichever camera we're currently down. Yeah, the video is probably the best place to go get a real, what are these 4 sections doing? And the quick start guide from Dom and the team is really good as well. The graphics are really, really helpful for understanding what's going on. Yeah, come and have a play. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm now just waiting for me to walk off screen so I can hit end stream.
Never off.